Welcome, one and all, to I'm Nature, the show where we search for solutions to all the world's major problems. And I usually begin my show with a shout out to Angela Black, my great producer. How are you doing, Angela?
I'm hanging in there. It's been a very weird, glitchy sound day. And the other
And
thing
I,
is, I had smoke in our skies over the weekend, and then we had some really damp, cold rain last night. So I have a little bit of a head cold thing going on too. So that's fun.
well, we got really whacked yesterday with geoengineering trails, and I couldn't believe it today. This woman comes to my door. She's running in the election, the federal election here. She's a Liberal candidate, which is kind of like a Democrat up here in Canada. And you think I could see one or find one up in the sky for her? Absolutely nothing but, that horrible haze. But I sent her some stuff on it. I hope she's going to read it.
Oh, good.
She had no idea. She had never even heard of the term before.
Well, good looking out. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So who's on your show tomorrow? You got it. Oh no, we know who's on your show tomorrow. I'm on with
David Dene.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. I'm excited, and you're going to be there too, right? If you like. You were invited.
I'll be coming in. I got to get up early the next day, but I'm going to do it anyways.
Okay, or at least whatever the first hour, but you'll stay because David's awesome and you're awesome, and I'm sometimes awesome. Depends. Anyway, wow, we've got a regular on the show today, don't we?
Two regulars.
Yeah.
Now I don't see James McCanney. I see he's green on my Skype screen here. We still don't have him in the studio, my dear.
So in the meantime, we have
Warren. Hey, Warren.
Hey, buddy. All right. I are here.
You are here. How's my buddy Warren doing?
Excellent.
Excellent. Warren's my regular political insider.
Correct.
And he's coming to us he's got that beautiful Alabama accent.
South of the Mason-Dixon line.
You sound a little distant to me. Can you get a little closer to your mic, Warren? I thought we had it.
I'm just about as close as I can get.
Okay. You're clear.
Let me do one thing that might help a little. Hold on.
You sounded better while we were off air there. You were working on it with your settings and whatnot, but
Dun, 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 dun. It's game show music while you're fixing.
So what, Angela? Why can't you grab James? Is he not?
I'm texting him right now. He's on. He's not answering. We'll get him. Don't worry.
Oh, okay.
I sent him a text. So.
Oh, great. Okay.
You could tell everyone when they are, which is Revolution Radio.
Yeah, you're on Revolution Radio with I Am Nature and Warren Trammell, a political insider. His dad used to work with Senator. Jog my memory, Warren.
I think he's not there.
Warren, you still there?
We're talking about Governor Wallace, I think, right?
Well, Governor Wallace, of course.
Not Senator Wagner. Anyway, we lost Warren's. See, it wasn't just me. Like typing. Skype stuff is happening.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going on everywhere. There's a bunch of weird stuff going on.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Just glitches everywhere.
He's typing here a bit.
Wow.
Well, I have a great show lined up, folks. It's just a matter of getting the people into Skype.
Yeah, so I don't know what you did to fix it, Warren, but it didn't work. I can't hear you. Go back to the way it was.
He did something.
Oh, yeah. We should not do that anymore on the air. I think, if at all possible.
Yeah.
He was fine beforehand. You know what they say? Don't fix it if it ain't broke.
Okay, I'll be
Yay!
back.
You're back, Warren.
Okay, very good.
Welcome to Skype Glitch Land.
All is good. So, I was going to talk with James about some nuclear issues, but let's start with Warren until we can find a way to get James in here into the discussion. James, Tier 1 scientist, and so Warren, where are things at with this book you're trying to publish?
Well, I just got a note yesterday from my good literary agent. It's Lisa Elkins Goodman out in California. She lives just above San Diego, a little mountaintop up there. And it took her almost a year, but she finally made contact with the famous Daniel Ellsberg of the famous Pentagon Papers. He's the guy that stole the Pentagon Papers out of the Nixon White House and exposed the corruption going on in the Pentagon. And for some miraculous reason, he is still alive today. And he lived and has written several books on it, and still has. He's I think in his mid 80s, but he still has a sharp mind, and he has contacts with movie people and television people. And we're talking about not only a book, but possibly a television series that would be similar to the television series called West Wing that was so very popular some years ago. At the time, it was a story about what goes on behind the scenes in the White House. And this could be our story. It could be the southern version of that would be what goes on in the governor's office behind the scenes. It's running for president, and what goes on in all the shenanigans that goes on in a political campaign when you're running for president, particularly when you're running for president against the infamous Richard Nixon and his cabal of hoodlums and crooks and gangsters and assassination specialists. And the Bush family, he was very much in cahoots with the Bush family, and so he was familiar with that. And it would be a great story to show behind the scenes, and the book itself, which is entitled "Madness in the Magnolias." I don't know if y'all have magnolias up there in New York City, but that's one of the things the South is famous for. Big, huge magnolia trees here. It's famous for being
we don't have them up in Canada. Remember, I'm up in Canada near Toronto. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know what magnolias. Okay. Well, you know what magnolias are. Well, they are famous for here in the South too. So the entire manuscript, 325 pages, is entitled "Madness in the Magnolias." The main story in that is the Alabama Project, which was a phrase coined by Richard Nixon himself. And
is that the name of the book you want to publish, "Madness in the Magnolias"?
Yes.
Okay. Is that your title or your dad's title?
That's my father came up with that. Having been raised in the South, he was so familiar with the magnolia tree, and it has a lot of what's the grammatic term when words start with the same vowel consonant? The madness, magnolias, has that grammatical synchronicity and of the words, and so he liked the
alliteration, maybe.
Alliteration.
Sure.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry. Alliteration. That's exactly what it is. Thank you very much.
Well,
alliteration.
I was never very strong in grammar, but I think that might be it. Yeah.
I think you're correct. I agree with your diagnosis. It's Madness in the Magnolias, and then the main story in that is the Alabama Project, the phrase that Richard Nixon coined because he knew that Wallace was his main adversary, and in the years of 1968 and 1972, those presidential elections, my father and Wallace came within a centimeter of causing Richard Nixon to lose both of those races. And so we just picture Richard Nixon picking up the phone and calling his assassination team and saying, "Okay, guys, I've had it with these two guys, Seymour Trammell and George Wallace, and
they won't play ball. They won't play ball. They won't back off."
There you go. There you go. They're not playing by the rules, and so they caused me too much trouble. And they came with a centimeter of making me lose in 1968, and I'll just be damned if I'm going to let some upstart Southern redneck guy, keep me from being president of the United States a second time. And so he calls up his team that included Daddy George Bush, who he appointed CIA director for 1 year. Have you ever heard of a CIA director being appointed as a CIA director only for 1 year, and it was that 1 year. I think it was 1971 through maybe part of 72 that was the only time that Daddy Bush was CIA director, and so he was there just to help Nixon put together this Alabama project to it started out as an IRS persecution, and that
Can
didn't
we
work
just
out.
can we just hold on for a sec? I had a question I want to ask you like 5 minutes ago, and I should have jumped in. But
Okay, good,
this
good, good.
the Pentagon Papers by Ellsberg. Can you sort of give me a quick summary of what he found, or what were these widely? I think they were widely published down there, eh? In the media, the mainstream media. This is a time when the mainstream media wasn't as controlled as it is now, right?
That's correct, huh? At that time in history, the Pentagon was going through a tremendous amount of corruption because the Vietnam War was going on. There was a lot of illegal and unethical military contracts going on. There's a lot of really politically corrupt things going on with Vietnam, which was a war over oil. They had discovered oil off the coast of South Vietnam, and all the oil barons wanted that wanted to be friends and have control over South Vietnam. The U.S. oil barons wanted it. The North Vietnamese wanted it. France had some interest in it, and France actually helped the North Vietnamese a little bit. It was also a large deposit of aluminum found in South Vietnam, and the French wanted that, according to Lisa Goodman. And so,
Is my history right, Warren? Were the French not in there before the U.S. went there? Were they not? Their
you're
natural,
correct.
sort
That's
of
correct.
natural
Yes,
ally?
they were in there trying to get the aluminum. They I don't know if they didn't know about the oil or what. I don't know that part of the story, but eventually our oil people, they had invented the offshore deep water drilling where they had the rigs, floating rigs out in the ocean, out in the waters, so they could drill, go down to the floor of the waters there and drill down from the floating oil rigs.
You
Those
mean
had
they
been invented.
started that? They started that in Vietnam or off the
No,
coast?
no, no. It didn't start in Vietnam. It started over here, but it was a fairly new development at that time. It wasn't brand
Yeah.
new. It was fairly new at that time. It was sort of developing technology, you might say. And uh, H.L. Bunker Hunt of Hunt Oil Company in Texas was a very close friend of my father's and Governor Wallace's, and gave millions of dollars to the Wallace campaign.
The Hunt
And
brothers.
the Hunt brothers, they did. My father, H.L. Hunt, Bunker Hunt, wanted to hire my father, but we didn't get. That's another part of the story, but he didn't get to. He didn't get to. And eventually, Richard Nixon also went after Bunker Hunt and the Hunt oil people because they supported Wallace, and they almost broke the Hunt family. Nixon did. They broke my father's family, my family, our family, and the Wallace family broke them and broke three or four other rich families in Montgomery that were Wallace supporters. And so then they went after the Hunt family in Texas and just about broke them.
Now, I'm just curious, just getting back to this, the Pentagon Papers.
Right.
I'm a
It was
big, a believer that the military-industrial complex is pretty much the highest level of corruption in the world, and it's pretty much
absolutely.
running the show.
They are
Uh,
the benchmark.
what sort of so what were the other revelations? Was the Gulf of Tonkin in those papers?
I'm sure they must have been. I'm sure that must have been part of it.
The
I
false
will.
flag thing there? Yeah,
I'll
started
do
the
some.
war.
I'll do some research on that with Lisa and kind of look that up. But there was a great deal of corruption, as you know, and the Pentagon Papers revealed all of that corruption. And Daniel Ellsberg was just determined to expose all of that, and he did. And how he managed not to be assassinated by Nixon, I don't know, but somehow he did, and
Or
he
somebody
lived.
else. I mean, There's like what 20 intelligence agencies in the U.S. at least. I mean,
At
yeah, they
least.
could have picked any one of any one of them.
Sure, sure. I don't know how Daniel Ellsberg managed to. I'm not even sure that there were any attempts made on his life, but I'm not sure about that. We can do
And what
a
was
bit.
it? Did anything come of it? Was there a commission held, or was there any sort of attempt to redress some of the corruption and the obvious, like, tons of conflict of interest in the Pentagon
The
today and
best,
always?
the best of my memory is that there was not much ever done. It was Nixon was able to sweep that under the rug some kind of way, and I don't remember much ever happening. There were no televised hearings on it. It was never brought to the attention of the media all that much. It was considered uh, a subject of interest, but it was just never investigated. It never got the attention that Watergate did, for example, if you want to compare those. Uh, the Pentagon Papers just never. Remember, the general public is so ignorant of our military. Nobody knows anything about it much, compared to you and I. And so it was just not a. It was not a subject that the media felt like average people could really get their minds wrapped around, and it was not a subject that created a lot of public interest. And so Nixon was able to let it die of itself and be swept under the rug and pretty much forgotten about. And Nixon was actually until Watergate, Nixon had a pretty high rating around the country, and so people, I think, really thought that at the time that maybe Daniel Ellsberg was maybe an enemy of America almost, and was for a while until the truth came out and was exposed. Ellsberg was not really looked upon as as having done something good to expose the corruption in the Pentagon. Nobody believed there's that much corruption in the Pentagon, and
He
there's
must
probably
have he must have been a fan of Eisenhower's, eh? And his last few statements
uh,
about the beware of the military-industrial complex. It's coming.
right,
He
right.
called
He
it
was
military governmental industrial complex. He
right.
saw the fascist connection between business and the military in the U.S.
He did, and he warned of it, and
It's
rightly
pretty much
so.
one. It's pretty much one agency. It isn't really separate. Most of the generals retire, they get big jobs, nice positions on the boards of the major arms manufacturers in the U.S. It's
Correct.
a complete. I mean, it's completely corrupt. And it's not just corrupt, but it's doing a hell of a lot of damage on the planet, unfortunately.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. They are responsible for a great deal of the pollution. They might even have some. They might be even related to the chemtrail operation, possibly. Uh,
Oh, no doubt, man. I don't think
so
there's
they
much
are
doubt about that. Dane and I talked about that. Dane Wigington. He said, "Yeah, there's no other agency on the planet that could be spraying, like, have thousands of jets in the air every day, spraying everywhere. It's got to be a military operation." And
got
the
to be
U.S. has 175 bases off its soil, or sorry, not 175, but about 1,000 in other countries. Lots in
right.
Europe, but they're all over the planet. They're pretty much everywhere except I think. I think they might even have. I think there's some close to China, but not right in China. But they have some in every country, I think, pretty much on the planet, other than the Soviet Russia, not Soviet Union.
Right,
Yeah.
right. The
If you watch the hockey games, I sometimes watch the hockey feeds, and you get the U.S. Networks that are doing broadcasting hockey games, and they brag about being broadcasting to 105 different nations on the earth through the Armed Forces television network.
right.
You look it up. I mean, they have a huge website, the Armed Forces TV network.
They do, and they reach to every corner of the world.
Yep, yep. And you see these Navy commercials. We're on 7 continents, so they're even in Antarctic. They have a base down there too.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've I've done some reading lately about Antarctica, and Admiral Byrd that did most of the discovery work down there, and some of the controversial things he claims to have discovered and claims to have seen and heard and so forth. And as a result, the exploration of Antarctica has been held to a very limited, very limited in scope. They don't want anybody in Antarctica exploring, or looking, or snooping around. There's just too much going on down there, they claim. So it's Admiral Byrd did mention that there were a lot of minerals. It was very rich in minerals for mineral exploration and other valuable resources there in Antarctica. So that's that's still actually Antarctica and the Arctic are still very much secretive parts of the Earth. Putin in Russia, they're doing most of the exploration in the Arctic. There's a lot of oil and there's a lot of gold up there. There may be the largest gold mine on the planet. May be up in the Arctic region. It's a hard word to say for a southerner. In the Arctic region. So there's a lot of conflict there with Russia and some other countries over the resources in the Arctic and the Antarctica. And the military, and it's all military based. And that's what Daniel Ellsberg was trying to expose, is the corruption in the military and how he avoided being assassinated. One of these days I want to hear about it. But it's a tremendous amount of corruption going on in the military. All of the companies, the military complex, companies, corporations that produce all the arms and surveillance and electronics, most of the congressmen own stock in those countries, own stock in those companies. And that's how some of those congressmen are multi-millionaires from those kind of investments. And the military-industrial complex pretty much owns the Congress and tells him what to do. I know we have a senator here in Alabama, Senator Richard Shelby, who is owned and operated by the military. And today he's got to run for re-election, I think maybe either this year or 2 years from now, and he already has $18 million in his war chest. And if he needed another 18 million, all he'd have to do is pick up the phone and call the military guys, and they would send it to him. So he is one of the senators. That is our other senator is the famous Jeff Sessions that you might hear about a lot. He's a more famous senator from Alabama that's really on our side of the table, mine and your side of the table. And
oh, really? There are some.
I guess, his name. There's one or two. He may be Senator Jeff Sessions is one of a very small handful, maybe a half a dozen that we think may not be owned and operated by the bad guys. And but they are pretty much held in check. They are mostly lone wolves crying in the wilderness. And they are pretty much ineffective. They can give speeches and talk a lot, but they really have no effect in Washington at all whatsoever. They have no political power up there at all. They are just mostly there as a voice of people like you and I.
The cards are stacked against them, no doubt. What about this Kachunik guy? Is he still around?
Wow, that is a name that I'm not totally
He's the one who was the brave man who brought forth in, I think it was the year 2001, the legislation to try to ban Star Wars, space-based weapon systems, geoengineering weapon systems, earthquake weapon systems, tidal wave weapon systems. Like, he knew they were working on all this stuff he was probably on the defense appropriations committee or something. He seemed to have a lot of good inside information on what they were doing, and he presented this bill to Congress, and it got shelved and eventually taken off the docket by the Defense Department. And it went to their committee, and of course, he asked the Defense Department to cut back on their spending. They're usually going to say, "No way, Jose." And
Right.
we need to have all these knowledge, these systems, because our competitors, the Russians, are working on them too. That's usually
Sure.
their way out of every attempt to lessen their power and expenditure. Is that, oh, we need to have these systems because the other guys got them.
That's right.
So
Russia and China have them, so we got to have them.
yeah,
And without any proof that Russia actually has them, how do we know Russia has them? What kind of proof do we have? They never show the proof of that.
well, I know the Russians don't have a military base in every country on the planet. I think the main aggressor is the United States right now on the planet.
Right. Right.
They sell 86% of the weapons
Right.
on the planet. We know who the tough guy in the block is right now. I think Putin's compared to Obama and what's going on in the U.S. is well, we'd be very lucky to have another Putin in the White House. That's all I can say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We some of us hope that maybe Trump might make it, but I don't think he's going to make it through the Republican National Convention. They won't. They won't. Bush, and although his poll numbers are still in the single digits, the bad guys own and operate and control the Republican National Convention, and they have a way of getting Bush in if they want to.
Okay, sounds like we're on the first break here, Warren. So we'll be back soon with more Volume Nature, and just go into the chat box more for me. Okay?
Okay,
Thanks.
all right.
Bye for now, folks. Welcome back to I Am Nature. I am your host, Brian Porter. Today I have my one of my favorite guests on, Warren Trammell, great political insider, lived, breathed, and ate politics as a child, watching his father work with Governor, oh God, Governor Wallace down in Alabama. Lifetime political insider. I guess Governor Wallace and your dad, Seymour, right? Seymour Trammell? Is your dad's
Correct.
name? They
Correct.
went to school. They went to school together, law school.
Correct.
Wow, I mean that's man. You're well positioned to know all the inside of what happened back in that era. So why don't we tell the story of why your dad wrote this book? What was he not at some point in his life in prison?
Yes, he was. As a result of the uh, Alabama project, the end result of that was that Nixon made a deal with Wallace to stay out of prison, and he did not offer my father any kind of deal like that. In fact, in the beginning, Nixon asked my father to give them some testimony on the Wallaces because for a short period of time, my father and Wallace had a falling out, political falling out, and the Nixon people called my father to Washington and to the Justice Department, and the local DA here, who was federal DA, who was a personal friend of ours, told my father that the IRS had over 30 counts of income tax evasion against my father, Governor Wallace, his two brothers, several of his family and friends, political friends here in Alabama, but that if he would come to Washington and testify against Wallace, Richard Nixon would give him a presidential immunity from prosecution, which they said was in effect. But when it came down to it, and there was a double cross. Wallace was famous for his double cross attempt operations, and he did double cross Nixon, and that's what really brought on the assassination attempts. But as a result, of the income tax evasion charges, Richard Nixon, as president, took back my father's presidential immunity and had him prosecuted in a fixed court trial and sent him to federal prison here in Alabama for some 2 years. And during the time that he was there, it began as just a matter of him clearing his mind, clearing his conscience, something to occupy his time out there, and he became
Warren, tell us a bit more about how your dad actually ended up in prison. Was there a trial, or how did that all transpire?
Okay, yes, there was a kangaroo court. My father had such a clean record of paying taxes that the government really could not find a legitimate reason to charge him with an income tax evasion. So they discovered in their research that a local businessman here had gone and installed a $3,000 swimming pool at one of my father's homes, and my father had sent him repeated requests to send him a bill, and he was going to pay for it. And his secretary sent the businessman many requests to pay for the pool, and in all the confusion of the governor's races and presidential races and so forth, the pool just never got paid for, and it got lost in the paperwork, so to speak. So the feds found this businessman. I'll think of his name in a minute. The company was Southern Sash here in Montgomery, in Alabama, and they got a hold of him and said, "Mr. Southern Sash, we have a deal for you. We need
Oh no!
We need you. Yes, we have an offer you can't refuse," as the Godfather would say. So the deal was for this guy to get in federal court and to commit perjury in federal court before a federal judge and lie and to say that the construction of the $3,000 swimming pool was a gift, a personal gift to my father, for which he should have paid taxes on. And the federal judge was so corrupt that he went along with it. Or Nixon put enough pressure on the federal judge that he had to go along with it. But the federal judge and Governor Wallace were at political odds at that time. And so the federal judge was more than happy to befriend Nixon and help him in his project against the governor. So the trial came up against my father for what the charge got to be was this swimming pool, this $3,000 swimming pool.
You're kidding. $3,000 swimming pool.
$3,000.
I mean, trillions of dollars going missing from the Pentagon.
Right.
And we're worried about a 3,000. We have the same kind of nonsense up here in Canada with a guy named Duffy. He's a senator, and some shenanigans. He overspent $90,000. I mean, it's all over the news. The guy's been on trial for 6 months. I mean, it's been going on for 2 years. I mean, so much corruption in government up here, and they're talking about $90,000. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. But I'm drawing a parallel from the way politics works. It's just so ridiculous, and the media getting sucked in, playing the game.
The media is on the side. They are in some way, I believe, my personal opinion, that the media is in some ways they're bribed, they are pressured. In some ways, they might be blackmailed, and or any other types of pressure that the government can put on them to go along with it. There's all kind of ways that the government can put pressure on the media to control the media, and so very often they do. And so this is what happened. That's what happens when you have these kind of corruption cases. The media just goes along with it because they don't want to make an enemy of the government, because the government has all kind of ways to get back at them. And so instead of going to war with the government, they just go along with it. It's more money for them and less hassle. So
our friend AJ, he claims that the media is paid by the government, hundreds of millions of dollars.
I believe that.
basically script. They're paid to script what the government wants to hear. No critical analysis anymore. Nothing.
No, no real what we used to call investigative journalism. There's none of that going on anymore.
Well, I mean, if you steal $90,000, to investigate you, but not if you steal trillions. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That was his problem. He just didn't steal enough.
Yes, the inverted world we live in. So your dad, he got somehow. I mean, you're saying that you don't believe there's even any validity to this $3,000 pool. I mean,
Oh
how
yes,
did that come out? Did your dad actually, was this like a political favor or some sort of a payback for something your dad or
no,
Wallace did
no.
for this guy?
We had a horse farm, some 15 or 20 miles below Montgomery, capital city, and we had a bunch of horses out there in a nice little cabin area, and it was real plush. And so thought it would be nice to have a swimming pool out in front of the house. It was rather small. And $3,000 is not a big swimming pool anyway, even back then. So he had this friend of the administration to tell him to go and build a swimming pool down there and send him a bill for it. And that's the way my father did business. Every year when the brand new Ford Thunderbirds came out, he would call his secretary actually would call the Ford dealer there in Montgomery and say, you know, come pick up my wife's old car from last year and bring her the latest new Thunderbird, and park it out in front of the house and send my secretary a bill for it, and we'll send you a check for it. That's the way he bought cars back then. And my mother drove Thunderbird, and my father drove the big Lincoln Mark series. And at that time, he had the new Lincoln Mark III, which is what he had the automobile accident in. But that's the way he bought and paid for things then. He just told the dealer, the company, to go build it, go deliver it, send me a check, send me a bill, and I'll send you a check. And that's just the way he did business. But this guy never sent my father a bill. I think that he was really hoping that it would be seen as a political favor, and that because he had his construction company, Southern Sash, provided a great deal of building materials to the state for a lot of the construction projects that the state had going on at that time, and he had a big contract with the state to provide them building materials, and so to build a swimming pool was just a penance. It was just pocket change for him, and just as a favor. He wanted it to be a favor, but my father was wise enough to press it because he didn't want to have the income tax liabilities, and there was just so much going on that it just slipped through the cracks, and the IRS found it and charged him with income tax evasion. And during the trial, it was an odd thing. During the trial, the people on the jury knew that it was a trumped up case, and they were about to let my father go. They were about to say, well, he may be, kind of guilty, so whatever taxes he owes or whatever fines he owes, just let him pay the taxes and the fine and let him go.
Didn't he get like 2 years in prison?
Right, that's what I'm fixing to tell you. So,
I mean, that's ridiculous for a $3,000 potential political. I mean, the guy obviously was well connected to the government. He was getting all these contracts. There's probably some kickbacks going on. That's the way it works in government, buddy.
Sure it is. Sure it is.
Yeah, everything works that way. Yeah, but $3,000. I mean, that's chump change to these guys. That's like a tip at a restaurant.
Absolutely, it is, and it was just but actually it gets worse than that. The judge discovered that the jury was about to let my father go, so he calls the federal DA, and he actually calls Nixon, we believe, and says, "Hey, they're fixing to let Seymour Trammell go on this evasion charge. What can I do?" And apparently the story from the federal DA says that Nixon said, "I don't know what you have to do to find him guilty." and I don't know who came up with it. I don't know if Nixon came up with it or the federal judge came up with it, but the charge then got increased from just plain old income tax evasion to conspiracy to commit income tax evasion. So that's what the charge wound up being, was conspiracy. And when you talk about conspiracy, that makes it an even stronger federal charge. And then that gives the federal judge the discretion to more or less determine whether he's guilty or not and determine what his sentence should be. So the federal judge, totally took it out of the hands of the jury, just totally, and changed the charge to conspiracy. So you can imagine how much conspiracy was going on for one man to not pay taxes on $3,000, and so that was even a bigger.
Who was representing your dad? He must have been doing backflips trying to figure out what's going on.
They were. Well, his law partner at the time, a guy named Bob Alton, was his law partner. His law partner was representing him. And because they were all, my father and his law partner were actually pretty close personal friends with the local DA. The governor's staff was always friendly with the local federal DA, and
Sure.
they were. And so the federal DA, whose name was Ira Dement, pull that name out, was really calling my father and Mr. Alton and telling them the inside scoop of what was going on and what they had to do. I think he may have been even instructed by the federal judge to do so, to tell them, this is what is coming down and this is what you better do. So they got word that the charge was going to be changed to conspiracy, and that he would be found guilty and be sentenced, and that his presidential immunity had been taken away from him, had been negated or done away with. They took it back. They took back the conspiracy charge, conspiracy protection, the immunity protection, immunity. They took that back, and then charged my father with conspiracy, and then sentenced him to actually some 4 years. His original sentence was 4 years in federal prison, and it finally got reduced to 2 years. So it was pretty. It was just pretty much legal and courtroom corruption to the max.
Was it highlighted in the papers the other day? Was there anybody defending your dad?
No. The newspaper here was very liberal at the time, and they went along with the story. They went along with the judge, went along with the president, went along with the federal judge, Frank Johnson. He was the federal judge that really handed down the edicts to end segregation in Alabama. His reputation in history became known as the desegregation judge, and that's how he became famous, handing down all the federal edicts abolishing integration here in Alabama. And he got many threats, and he had armed guards with him all the time and around the house 24/7, because he was under a lot of threats by the Ku Klux Klan and the white supremacists, the White Citizens Council, all the white hate groups here had threats against him all the time. And eventually those threats caused his brother, the federal judge had a brother, the pressure got so intense that his brother actually committed suicide because of the death threats.
Sorry, who was that again? I missed that. Who committed suicide?
The federal judge in my father's case had a brother. The federal judge was, of course, given death threats all the time, and his brother was given death threats all the time. And his brother just couldn't handle the pressure of death threats, and so he committed suicide because of the death threats.
And the threats were on the premise of trying to imprison your dad, do it or else?
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the higher levels of functioning of the world. It's all done at the barrel of a gun.
Absolutely. All of this came down from President Richard Nixon. So that's about as high as you can go.
Well, folks, think of it this way on a grander scale. Who do you think has more power, the guy with the money or the guy with the gun? Money can buy people, but guns is the bottom line, folks. If the money doesn't buy them, the gun will, or the gun will get rid of them. This is why I believe the military-industrial complex is the highest authority on the planet. The bankers are certainly in there having fun, making lots of money. They're certainly hard to distinguish between the two of them, but the military are running things, folks. Yeah. Okay.
No question about that. No question.
You agree with me?
They handle the assassinations. They handle the buying and selling of armaments all over the world. And I know for a fact that there are armed military people in 32 countries in Africa that are stealing the resources of Africa, which is oil and a tremendous amount of other valuable materials that are needed in the production of armaments. And military is there. Of course, that's where the drugs are in South Africa. All of the marijuana fields and the poppy fields are all guarded by U.S. military. And that's how the military-industrial complex is used all over the world to protect and steal resources all over the planet.
Yeah, this is why, I mean, there's a lot of people saying that the U.S. dollar is going to crash and everything, but unless only if they want it to. I'm not convinced. I think it is pretty much still the world currency. There's a few people on Rev Radio that think it's going to crash, but again, the military, until the U.S. loses its military superiority on the planet, I don't think it's going to crash. That's my opinion. We'll see who's right, but I do believe that the greedy hordes of people who basically run this planet are going to back the U.S. dollar because they feel it's their best bet for securing their investment money.
Correct.
And so I think there are lots of people trying to get in on the action. The Chinese, the Russians are trying to create their own currency, trying to get around the U.S. dollar. Now, maybe between those two countries, the Russians and the Chinese, they'll be able to do trading within their own currencies. But I don't think that other nations, I don't think it's coming down at any time until someone somehow develops a technology or something that the U.S. doesn't have that puts them in their place and takes them out of #1 position on the planet. It's been the trend. I mean, the Brits used to have the pound as the world currency before the Second World War, right?
Right,
and
correct.
They had the most powerful military before that happened, and then that was one of the reasons the Americans held off, right? They didn't go into the war until 1942 because they wanted to see Britain brought down a few notches, and we've talked about this. In fact, the Bush family was part of the financing of Hitler in Nazi Germany because I think that was the plan.
Prescott Bush.
Yeah, they wanted to bring down the Brits. They wanted to become the preeminent power on the planet, and this is the way it works, folks. So, but anyways, getting back to this really intriguing story of yours about your dad and just the way the system works, it's just unbelievable. I mean, how corrupt it is. But we see what it is that in the event that nothing else works, you pull out the gun, folks. This is the way the world works.
And that's why Governor Wallace was shot. And 6 months before that, that's why they contrived an automobile accident in Montgomery, our capital city, in an effort to assassinate my father. And we know that from the book that G. Gordon Liddy wrote called Will, W-I-L-L, because during the Watergate hearings, he had the strongest will of anybody. When he was on the stand in front of Judge John Sirica and refused to testify, Judge Sirica, I remember seeing it on television, pointed the gavel at him and said, Mr. Liddy, if you do not answer my question, I'm going to hold you in contempt of court, contempt of this hearing, and I'm going to send you to federal prison. And G. Gordon Liddy held up his hand and said, Judge, put the cuffs on me. I'm ready to go.
Beautiful story. Okay, we'll be back soon with more of my fascinating political insider, Warren Trammell, on I Am Nature. Welcome back to I'm Nature. I'm your host, Brian Porter. And this week I have Warren Trammell, my favorite political insider, on with me. And this is the time of my show when I usually do my support pitch for this amazing network, freedomslips.com Revolution Radio. 80 hosts, 2 different platforms going most of the time, 24 hours, 365, folks. Just an incredible amount of information, most of it extremely accurate, in my opinion. You listen for yourself to determine that. But I'm telling you, these people, we have no commercials. We have no conflicts of interest on this station. It is the purest place for information, in my opinion, on this planet. It's very well supported by many people across the globe as well, and who knows, elsewhere. So all I suggest as part of my plea to you is to donate, try to earmark $5 a month for the station, folks. I mean, that's a cup of coffee, 2 cups of coffee at a very cheap place these days. And we need your support in order to maintain our integrity and our independence as a source of news, information, you name it. We've got great psychics. We've got all sorts of people who are doing their best to try to fix this planet. And believe me, we all need to support one another in that endeavor. So now getting back to my guest, Warren. So Warren, incredible story you got there. I mean, your dad being, what was the official charge your dad faced for the $3,000 pool?
Conspiracy to commit federal income tax evasion.
Okay.
Conspiracy. Accent
Yeah.
on conspiracy.
I mean, the guy's clean as a whistle. He gets nailed for a $3,000 pool he didn't ever got a bill for. I mean, what are you supposed to? And he was a rich man. He had lots of bills to pay.
Sure.
I'm not saying your dad was lily white, but honest to God, trillions of dollars gone missing. Oh, every department in the U.S., all governments are pretty much corrupt. We don't need governments, in my opinion. Governments are just there they're like a sophisticated mafia network.
That's right.
Really?
Fastest government.
Yeah, taxes. What's a tax? Come on. We know how to live. We've always known. We've been living without government for thousands of years until the Egyptians came along, and well, they really did a number on this planet, and they're still doing a number. But
Sure.
Getting back to your great story here, this very accurate portrayal, I believe, of what happened. So your dad gets a 4-year sentence for a minor infraction.
Absolutely.
And he ends up in, was it a nice jail or was he put in a tough spot?
Well, actually, to be truthful with you, this is one of those places that is called the country club prisons.
Oh, that's good.
Right.
At least you got the country club and not one of these hard labor places. I mean,
right. Exactly.
You didn't have to do slave labor for the prison corporations.
Exactly. The prison location, actually, the only semblance of something that would let you know that it was a prison, there was I guess it was about 4 feet, a 4-foot tall, just fence, like a garden fence, okay, around the compound. That what kept the guys inside was the fact that if they tried to leave the compound and were captured, which we knew they would be sent to the big house, the hard labor place over in Atlanta, Georgia. So nobody wanted to go to the hard house, to the big house, and so they were content to spend their time at the country club there, and they were afforded some amenities. They had workout areas, and my father got back into good physical condition and probably added 20 years to his life. And he became very good friends with all the guards there because they knew he wasn't supposed to be there, and all the other inmates there who knew he wasn't supposed to be there. And he would give free legal advice to all the guards and all the inmates there.
A nice perk, eh?
Yeah, so he became the #1 star on campus, you might say, because he gave free legal advice to everybody. And one guard in particular that he befriended allowed him to go into the office at night when everybody was assigned to go to their barracks. They would come and get my father out, and take him to let him go into the guard's office area and use the typewriter. And without a dictionary, without any reference material, without the internet, without Google, you know, he recalled all of this from his own memory, and typed out a 325-page manuscript with very few grammatical errors, very few historical errors. Well, no historical errors, but very few grammatical errors and very few, misspellings or typos. But he used a manual typewriter to type this 325-page manuscript. And the way we got it out, during that time in history, it was illegal for an inmate to do that. So every day.
Was it illegal to write a book back then?
Yes, prison? It was. It was illegal to write about your case. Yes, and illegal to write a book, period, I believe, but especially it was illegal to write about your case. And so every day, people ask me if I've ever been in prison. I said, yes, I was in federal prison for 2 years, because I went to see my father every day for 2 years. And they did allow me to bring in a newspaper to him. So every day I'd bring in a newspaper, and he would have typed, 15 to 20 pages a day. And he would, as we would sit outside the picnic tables in the visitation area, he would pull the 15 pages out of his shirt and slip them into the newspaper, and I would take the newspaper out with me, when I went, and that's how we got it out. So we were taking an awful chance to sneak that out without being caught, and we weren't really too worried about it because the guards didn't care. The guards didn't care. Nobody cared, really. So.
Didn't they hear the same story? I'm sure he told the story in prison. You know
what? He did not.
Really?
He did not. Nobody. The only person that knew anything about it was the guard that let him use the typewriter, and he told the guard that he was just trying to tap out his personal history, just as a way of recalling it and kind of clearing his mind, clearing his conscience, clearing his heart, his soul, his spirit, because he had a tremendous amount of hatred and bitterness toward the Wallace people, toward Frank Johnson, toward Richard Nixon, and so forth. And we didn't know till a few years after that his automobile accident was an assassination attempt, but he had this hatred and bitterness against Nixon and Judge Frank Johnson, the federal judge, and the Wallace family, and so forth. And,
okay, Warren, I hate to interrupt, but I should bring in James McCanney. He's finally signed in with us. James, are you there?
I'm here. I'm listening intently, so continue, and then I'll try and pick up the theme and jump in here. But continue.
Okay, it sounds like you're cooking in the background. So hit mute. You just want to listen.
Oh, I'm not cooking, but I will hit mute.
Okay, great. Okay, Warren, keep going.
So I want to go back for just a second to what you said. That, you mentioned the fact that probably my father was not completely innocent of everything, and indeed he was not. In fact, when he was
well, Warren, you can't get that high in politics and be a lily white person. I mean, come on.
Correct. So when my father went to Washington to the Department of Justice and talked to the officials there at the DOJ, and they were questioning him about the swimming pool and other things, and that's it. Of course, they were claiming that that's what he was guilty of. He told them, he said, "Now let me tell you something, guys. I'm guilty of a hell of a lot of things, and I can tell you a lot of stuff that I'm guilty of, because we broke a lot of laws and we did a lot of graft and corruption to the nth degree. But I'm telling you, this swimming pool, I'm not guilty of. But I can't." Absolutely. He said, "I can tell you a dozen things that I am guilty of. Absolutely guilty of, I can tell you." And I said, "Well, Mr. Tryman, we know that you have millions of dollars buried in the ground out there at your farm." And he looked at him and said, "No, I wish I did, but I don't. But I can tell you, if I had those millions of dollars, this is what he told them. He said, if I had those millions of dollars buried, I'd go bring it up, and I'd bring it up here and give it to Rich and Nixon, and you SOBs wouldn't be bothering me. So he told him he didn't have the money buried, and
How did they
that
manage to break your dad financially, though? You said he was a rich man, and then he died poor.
well, they when they came to Alabama, when the plant sent, we don't know how many plane loads, maybe it was a dozen or more plane loads of IRS agents, and they went to every bank in the state to investigate their dealings with the Wallace administration and my father. When you
This is what we're paying for, folks, to set people up. Plane loads of IRS agents for a $3,000 pool. I mean, honest to God.
Nixon, no doubt, spent, even at that time, millions and millions and millions of dollars sending IRS agents and flying them back and forth, all the plane loads and all the administrative and all this investigative IRS investigative operation, which was the IRS kept a file called the Alabama Project. That's where the Alabama Project files were kept, with the IRS, and they had it buried very, very deep in the very, very secretive, deep IRS files, the Alabama Project. And so when they were putting it together, as I said, my father told them, there's a lot of things I'm guilty of, but this ain't one of them. This swimming pool is not one of them. I can tell you, I sent this guy a note, my secretary did a dozen times saying, send me a bill, and he just never did. And it got lost in the paperwork, in the commotion of the presidential races and so forth. But I can tell you at least a dozen other things that I am guilty of, that Governor Wallace is guilty of, the family is guilty of, and many others are guilty of, but this swimming pool is just not one of them. And they just didn't believe, they, for some reason, they were looking for something against him personally, not that the Wallaces were involved in.
Well, it may have implicated other people that they didn't want to get involved in it, so they had to create something out of nothing. That's the advantage of this sort of ploy.
Yeah. Absolutely, that's the power of the president. And the control and the power that he has over agencies, and he can just point the finger. As Obama says, he had a telephone and a pen, and he can call people up and tell them what to do, and they do it just from the word "do," without any legal or constitutional background and justification for it. He can just say, "You guys do this," and he does. And so he tried to tell them, he said, look, guys, I'm not guilty of this, but I can tell you at least a dozen more other things that I am guilty of, and that the administration is guilty of, but this pool is just not one of them. And they didn't buy it. They wanted something against him personally. They even came to the University of Alabama. I was a student at the University of Alabama during this time. They came to they sent IRS agent to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, to the University of Alabama, to investigate who paid my tuition, who bought my car that I had to drive, which I had a brand spanking new Corvette actually, who bought my Corvette, who paid for my apartment, who paid for me to play golf at the country club there, and any other expenses, that I had, who paid for it. They just felt like, that some company somewhere had paid for all of this for me to be in college, and that could be counted as income to my father, on which he didn't pay taxes. But what they found out was that my father paid for every dime of my education. He even, in fact, there was no cost to belong to the country club there. It was a automatic perk to the governor's staff at that time, and so I was actually playing golf at the country club there for free. So there was no money involved there. So
lucky you. Hey, Warren, let's bring James into the discussion now. He's so kind as to call in, and
yes, I want to talk to James.
I'm not sure you know James that well, but I'll introduce you to him. James, are you with us?
Hello. Yeah, I found out where the noise was coming from, so I'm noise free now. Is that okay? Does it sound good?
You're a genius, so I'm glad you could figure that out.
Well, you know what it was? It was the refrigerator. So
Okay, yeah. When the compressor comes on, it can make some noise.
So the
Yeah.
refrigerator's running?
I just moved away from it.
Oh, because I was going to say you better go catch it. Sorry.
Oh,
Good stuff.
so
So
you want
how
to
you
catch it?
doing, James?
I'm doing real good. I'm doing real good. Yeah, I happened to live through the Nixon era myself, and
Ah.
oh my goodness. But I don't want to lead us off the path of that you were following here. Maybe you lead me as to if you would like me to comment on something or whatever.
If you want to ask Warren a question, feel free. Have you been following the discussion? His dad was basically the second-hand man to George Wallace, and was very much a combatant of Nixon through the many election presidential, a couple election campaigns, and almost took him out. So yeah, he didn't like his dad or Wallace.
Oh
That's the
yeah, so
connection.
political enemies through the agencies, absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, let's from a scientific point of view, let's look at who went to the moon allegedly. Uh, John Kennedy, of course, beat Nixon in the campaign there to become president, and that was a personal. Nixon took things personally, even though he was a party member and things like that.
He
But
was
when
very
I ended up,
and he was a very paranoid person, as we know today.
oh, yeah, yeah. But the boys out in California, I got to meet a lot of them when I had my in the early 1980s, which was a bit later. I was looking for venture capital out in California, and all of the venture capitalists were they all used the same attorneys as Richard Nixon. These were all buddies, um, and the graft and corruption. But what I saw there was I was in the middle of the Iran Contra affair, and so I saw it personally going on around me as I was looking for venture capital to work in the aerospace industries. But what caught my eye there was I was taken to some agencies, like one that strikes me. I remember Rubanis and Associates was out in L.A., but all these young guys were there. These were guys maybe 24, 25 years old, dressed impeccably, drove the Lamborghini sports cars around, flew all over the world, spoke multiple languages. And, I thought to myself, I'm out there trying to get funding for my science projects, my aerospace projects. And these guys are moving millions of dollars many times per day, starting companies, moving and shaking. They could go into a senator's office and say, move money to this project, and it would happen. Defense Department, all of this. And I thought to myself, doggone, I went to the wrong college. How do I get a job like this? And so when I realized that these were the kids of the families that basically ran the Rothschild empire, banking empire, and of course it was very indelibly linked with the military and aerospace industries out in California, San Diego. That whole coastline down there is filled with all of this. And so I got into some of these people's apartments, and they had very secure telecommunications equipment right in their condominiums. And so
Back then, wow.
oh yeah, yeah. And so anyway, the point I wanted to make was that when Kennedy was elected, he said, let's go to the moon. When they actually, 69, when it came about, Richard Nixon is president. And that's where the slip slide came in, because NASA couldn't go to the moon. They had serious technical problems all over the place. And so they faked it. And if they ever went to the moon, I'm not sure. But that was just another aspect of that whole time period. What I
James,
later, yeah, go ahead.
One of the few scientific tidbits that I heard about going to the moon that would indicate that they could not go to the moon was that we have this belt around the Earth called the Van Allen belt, and supposedly They couldn't figure out how to get through this radio, super radioactive or whatever it is, Van Allen belts. It would create such a tremendous amount of heat that any object, any spaceship, any rocket going through the Van Allen belts would melt the vehicle, burn it up to such an extent it would destroy the vehicle and kill all of the astronauts. And that's why they really didn't get to go to the moon, because they never figured out how to build a rocket strong enough to get through the Van Allen belts. Is there any truth in that?
What wasn't a question of the rocket power. The Saturn V was fully capable of going to the moon. The Russians had rockets fully capable of going to the moon. When I worked with Russian scientists in the mid-1990s, the University of Novosibirsk in central Russia, Alexei Dmitriev and his staff of atmospheric scientists, they told me, they said that the Russians had tried to go to the moon, and they had capability long before we did. They had the long duration flights. They had the more than enough power to get up there in orbit and send boosters that would get to the moon, etc. But they did try to send some men to the moon, and they came back very dead. There's one aspect of the lunar visiting the moon. You can go around the moon and come back. That's very easy. Landing on the moon, getting men out, walking around, that's a whole different ballgame. But anyway, they just tried to send somebody around the moon, bring him back. The guy came back, or the guys came back totally French fried. And they go, oops, something's wrong here. And so they never tried it again. If you look at NASA,
was it the Van Allen belts that cooked them on the way up and back?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and those are belts that are, and you think of a belt like this little narrow zone. These are big, wide, donut-shaped regions where you have high-energy protons going one direction, you have high-energy electrons going the other direction. What happens is when they hit metal in the spacecraft, they turn into X-rays. And it's the X-rays that basically fry the person. After the alleged moon program, NASA scrapped the Saturn V's, took down the launch towers, everything at Cape Canaveral, which they renamed Cape Kennedy after they killed him.
Right.
They took down all of that. They destroyed all of the paperwork for the Saturn V and the Apollo program, et cetera, so nobody could see it. And developed took years to develop the space shuttle, but they never went into above low Earth orbit after that, ever. And so if it was no big problem in 1969, why was it such a big problem later? They never went out of low Earth orbit again. I mean, it'd be like you getting on your bike and driving all around town, and then you only drove around the corner on the sidewalk where your house was after that. You know, what's wrong with this picture? But the other thing is that now they developed back in the 70s, they actually started a program called Living with a Star. And the scenes, the whole point was how to deal with...
We lost you for a sec, James.
The whole point of the program, NASA developed a program back in the 70s called Living with a Star. And I went to a lot of these meetings. But the point of Living with a Star, they had thousands of physicists, chemists, etc., working on this program. The point of it was how to deal with space radiation, how to, to
survive.
Get through the Van Allen belts. So if there was no problem in if all these astronauts went to the moon, came back, and they lived to be ripe old ages, you know, there could not be a problem. So there's obviously a big contradiction there. In fact, NASA's latest venture into space was a unmanned space probe with all kinds of instrumentation on it to understand the Van Allen belts. They sent it through the Van Allen belts and came back. And they keep saying, well, we're going to go to Mars in 2030 or, you know, some distant thing where, you know, way off in the future. And so they don't have to do anything now. But the whole point, getting back to
there's no way to get around the Van Allen belt? You can't, the trajectory from the point of trajectory from the planet, it can't be circumvented in some way? There's no hole in it?
Well, there is a way to do it. There are ways of dealing with this. But there are other problems that when you get out into outer space, you start to discharge. Well, the example I use is the backyard bug killer, zapper, or whatever you call it. When the bug flies in between the grid plates, the electrical discharge always goes right where the bug is. This is a property of electricity. So when you send a spacecraft out in space into these differential fields, electric fields, they're going to discharge right where the spacecraft is, just like the bug. NASA does not know how to manage this, and there are ways to manage this. I know how to do it, but I'm not going to tell them. And it's basic, enough said, but no, they don't know how to get through the Van Allen belts. And there are ways to deal with it, to obfuscate the effects. But going back to the Nixon era, which I think was what we were talking about, that was also the time when a young guy named George Bush was coming up through the ranks and working his way up in through the CIA. At the time, this is when the beginnings of the Iran-Contra issue happened, and the CIA cocaine money laundering drug operation that they actually ran out of Mena, Arkansas, which later moved to Waco, Texas. But this is what was going in the background in the United States, and nobody at the time knew anything about this. The Vietnam War was also a very high drug trafficking period of time. And they would use the soldiers who were dead, they would ship the drugs back in the cadavers.
Oh, I believe it. Okay, folks, it sounds like we're having a break coming up. I'll be back soon with I Am Nature and my special guests, Warren Trammell and James McCanney.
Broadcast shows from 2013 to listen to anytime you want. Awesome deal, huh? Anyway, so stop by freedomslips.com and order the entire 2013 library of your favorite host for just $30. Not only do you help with the station funding to keep us on the air, you also help the host because they get half of the net on every order. Also, we have Revolution Radio's all-time favorite shows all on one disc. The details are really broad, so you'll have to visit the website and go look at the details yourself. It's, again, www.freedomslips.com/season2013.htm and get your favorites. First come, first serve, 7 to 21 days for delivery. Thank you. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps, including me. Later.
We've got to stop them! They're going to kill us all!
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
And we are live. Brian Porter, I don't know if he's here or if he's muted. You are listening to I Am Nature with Brian Porter. I'm Angela Black, producing today, and we have guests James McCanney and Warren Trammell. Do I say it?
Hey, guys. Hey, Angela. Sorry, I forgot to come off
That's
mute.
okay. I just enjoyed the show. No problem.
Good show. Way to pick up from my my error there.
And is it Trammell or Trammell?
Trammell.
Trammell.
The accent is on the TRAM.
Indeed. All right. Enjoy your last half hour, guys.
Thanks, Angela. So, yeah, I got a question for both of you. Just switching the topic a bit. I want to get back to the interview we had a few weeks ago, and I was actually at a provincial park with my kids on holidays, and I had a really bad connection there. I didn't really want to say too much because there was so much background noise drowning out everyone. But the issue of one of our hosts, his name is Earthblay, I believe, he called in and asked about the nuclear radiation coming out of Fukushima. And I wanted to chime in there with what I consider to be my solution for the problem. And I just wanted to know, get James' opinion on the feasibility of doing this. With Fukushima, what we need to do is to build a huge barrier, like a huge wall, like you say, like a dike, out into the ocean, pump the water out, and then as that water coming from the plant drips into this huge crevasse, I'm talking huge, we cover it with zeolite to prevent it from going into the ocean. These whatever 300 tons of incredibly radioactive water that's leaking in daily from Fukushima. Would that work, James? I'm not saying it's going to be cheap to do this, but would that not be an effective solution?
I don't know. There are international companies that are set up to deal with this, just like BP oil spill down in the Gulf of Mexico. There are international companies that have the capability of managing this. Nobody is letting them do this. This has been the problem with these major earth-changing natural disasters, and I don't believe that Fukushima was a natural disaster. I believe it was actually blown up. But be that as
Correct.
it may, go again.
I agree with that. I think you're 100% correct in that it was an explosion.
Right, because you can see the videos at a distance, and this was an explosion of. And if you look at now, they're saying that this was a tidal wave that came in from the earthquake offshore and the tsunami, etc. There's a building, there's a warehouse that sits on the seaside of the four towers at Fukushima, the four cooling towers, where and right underneath those are where the radioactive reactors are. And they had the cooling. The reason they had 600,000 spent nuclear rods, fuel rods, on top of the buildings because the fans were cooling these. And that's the problem, because all of those spent when the incinerated when the towers blew up. And so anyway, but if you look on the seaside, there's this vast warehouse that's totally undamaged. How could a tidal wave come in, blow up these reactors, and cause all this damage to the reactors when that warehouse is totally untouched? This was so obviously, and there are good reasons for understanding who did it. But how to clean it up, there are international companies that deal with this kind of thing. They're set up to manage this. Nobody is allowing them to do it. The Japanese government, Obama could have made them do it. He didn't. He stepped down, played golf and sandlot basketball. These major disasters are being allowed to happen and to persist.
Yeah. Well, it's my view that there are solutions to these issues, and like you say, there may be people preventing them. I mean, to me, it's not rocket science. You got something leaking out of this reactor. It's right on the ocean. You can create a wall. Zeolite's a proven mitigator of radiation. This is what they used at Chernobyl. It cost a lot of money, but they managed to pretty much get it down. I think it's got about a 1% leakage now. It's not perfect, but it's manageable, and it's contained. It's not getting worse. At least that's my opinion. Is that accurate, James? You think Chernobyl's been dealt with, or is it just a time bomb ticking?
No. Chernobyl, it's the China syndrome. It's just, it's there, tremendously devastating in the area. But no, there's no way to cure this. There's no. There was a comedian on when I was a little kid, and he said, scientists have discovered a chemical that's so powerful it eats through anything. And he said now they're trying to discover a container jar to contain it, and that's the case with nuclear power. There's no way to contain this and actually absorb it or do something with it. That's why this is absolutely, nuclear power is a disaster worldwide. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Japan has opened up and restarted one of its nuclear reactors. And the same model as the GE was at the Mark One that was one of the ones that blew up there. Absolute insanity. I don't know how to stop this, but the nuclear power industry worldwide is tremendously powerful, and it just seems to be no way to stop them.
Yeah, it grew out of the military-industrial complex, trying to create a peaceful use for nuclear energy and atomic energy, and because people were pretty freaked out after the bombing in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and they had to try to make it look like they could use it for peaceful purposes, and of course, they just wanted a way to create weaponized, more fuel for their weapons and whatnot, and get the taxpayer to pay for it. So, yeah, I think it's the biggest scam. It's hard to choose between that and geoengineering. Those are the two biggest scientific frauds committed against the planet, in my opinion.
James, and Brian, some of the conspiracy theorists hypothesize that the reason they have not tried to mitigate the Fukushima disaster is that it is part of the New World Order depopulation program. They're killing the Pacific Ocean. The waters are hitting the shores from Alaska all the way down to South America, and killing all the fish and all of the sea life. And it's just part of, and it's coming ashore, and it's just part of their general depopulation program by the New World Order. How do you guys think about that?
Well, clearly, yeah, it's part of the plan. And to this level of destruction, those people rebel. They call themselves the destroyers, and that's what they're doing. They destroy. They reveled in this. And this is clearly something that is managed. This is not a haphazard natural event that is out of control. This is a managed disaster event, like Katrina.
Correct.
Was a very much a managed storm with the intent of clearing out the lower Ninth Ward. I used to live in New Orleans. Clearing out, it was basically social geoengineering of vast populations. Nobody knows what happened to all those people. Can you imagine there's, 1 million people that we have no accountability after Katrina?
Would you call that ethnic cleansing?
Ethnic cleansing, exactly. It's exactly what it is.
Wow, incredible.
A trial run for things to come, perhaps. James, another host on our esteemed network, his name is Dr. True Ott. I think I spoke with you about him before. He was talking about geoengineering, and he said that the Katrina was going backwards. The actual storm, everything in the northern hemisphere goes clockwise, and Katrina was going counterclockwise. And none of the people who were commenting on this storm actually, all the meteorologists, none of them seemed to think this was a relevant point. I mean, it was completely, obviously, a manufactured storm, in his opinion. What do you think of that, about that analysis?
Well, I'd have to go back and look at the data to see if it was going backwards. That would surprise me. But they were already betting on oil futures when Katrina was out in the middle of the Atlantic. I was at a place, it was a restaurant, it's kind of a fancy restaurant, and it had an outside patio on the waterfront. And I was there as the people were reveling at the time when Katrina was still out in the Atlantic on the oil futures, that they had their lock-in on the oil futures because they knew that thing was going to hit. And even on the news, they were talking about this could hit New Orleans. And how do you designate that a hurricane that's just forming in the middle of the Atlantic has got any place targeted? And Katrina came around the southern tip of Florida, kind of northwest into the Gulf. It hit a certain point, and it turned and it went due north. Hurricanes don't do this. Went due north to New Orleans, and as soon as it got a little south of New Orleans, it went east. And then it went over New Orleans and then cut through kind of the oil refinery areas around in western Mississippi. And then it followed north. But the day afterwards is when they blew the levees. The levees were blown in 7 places, to cause the flooding. And I remember that morning before the explosions, seeing live footage from cameras, street cameras down in downtown New Orleans. Like I say, I used to live there. I went to Tulane for 2 years. So I know that city like the back of my hand. I used to ride my bicycle around the levees all around the city, around the top of the levees. And the place where it blew on Lake Pontchartrain was way off in a channel. And they said, oh, that was the surge current that caused that. Well, absolutely absurd. Those were blown sections of the levee to cause the flooding, 7 places around the city. And those were demolished. The people said they heard the explosions. That city was taken out on purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like I say, a trial run for more disasters to come.
Let me ask you this: do you think the storm was created and guided by the HARP weather weapon?
No, what they use for hurricanes is laser satellites, and they had been playing with these out in the Atlantic Ocean quite previous to that. We saw hurricanes that would come around, do a loop-de-loop, and make a complete circle as they played with their toys, so to speak. In the mid-90s, when I was working with the Russian scientists, one of the things we worked on was controlling hurricanes. And that was the technology that was developed. It got into the hands of the U.S. military, and the rest is history. They started using it. The Russians went to the UN demanding that there be an international treaty against weather warfare. The United States would not sign it because one of the clauses was that you could not use it against your own people. You would think that weather warfare would be against countries.
Or would the Israelis?
For everybody. And part of this was to sign, but the United States wouldn't sign it because it prevented them from doing it against their own people. But Katrina, there were just many, many other storms that were manipulated. I have a whole history of analyzing this, and not all storms are manipulated. But Hurricane Katrina was managed by laser satellites, where they can lead it around. And what you do is you just put the laser satellite on the edge of the eye, and it moves in that direction.
Wow, that's the first time I've ever heard of that. That's new information for me.
Yeah, that's
James taught the military how to diminish hurricanes, and they just turned it around on them, right, James?
The whole point was to divert these hurricanes offshore. That's why we developed it. The Russians and myself. The Russians were the first ones to discover tornadoes on the sun. So they were atmospheric scientists. They were very good. And so the technique was to develop a method for dumping the water offshore before the hurricane hit land, and then also diverting them. And so that's what the technology was for. And then the U.S. military got it in their hands. And also, you have to understand that the Mossad controls the U.S. military. And so, these technologies are basically got into the hands of people who, like the Fukushima earthquake. That was a number of nuclear bombs. It wasn't a single explosion or event. It was multiple events that were placed down in a cavern about 5 miles offshore, off northeastern Japan. After the earthquakes, there were little eddy pools all over the place, which indicates an explosion where the land dropped down and caused these eddy pools to form out in the ocean. Actually, the earthquake was not that big. It was only a 5-point. When the tsunami hit Japan, you see the videos of the tsunami coming in. All the cars are in the parking lots. All the people are working. And the earthquake had already passed. Nobody expected this massive tsunami to come in. That was a man-made event. And even at that's not what took out Fukushima. Fukushima was like 9/11. The buildings came down due to explosions after the airplanes hit, and then they make this association, and that's the story that sticks.
What sort of weapon do you think they used to bring down the building, James?
Well, they were pulverized. When you look at the pictures of the World Trade Centers coming down, they were powder before they ever hit the ground. So these things were completely, the cement was completely pulverized. All the metal was melted, all the way down. It came in a perfectly straight demolition type of drop. And you can see the explosions coming out of the walls of the trade centers a couple of floors down from where it's coming from. So these were all timed explosions. But
So you think a similar weapon
there are people
used,
that say they were nuclear explosions. I really think that. I think that it was even hotter than plastic explosives, like they used at the Oklahoma building, the Oklahoma court building that they blew up, the federal building.
right?
That was very clearly the strap bombs down in the pillars in the basement that took that building down. And that was just regular plastic explosive strap bombs. But the World Trade Center, remember they had tried that during 1991. They had tried it and failed. They tried to take out the pillars at the support pillars down in the basement, and it didn't work. The building stood through that. So this time they wanted to make sure they put more explosives than was necessary. So when you see the buildings coming down, all of the cement is pulverized. It's in a fine powder form. That's why you see these big dust clouds coming down the street as the people are running down the street away from the building.
Right.
Wow,
So
incredible.
Incredible. Is that a type of explosive that we're not familiar with that they used, you think?
Well, no. I mean, hardened uranium tips on shells. That's why all the people in Iraq are having whole areas over there where people cannot have kids, because they're the amount of uranium. So these techniques of using nuclear fuel for explosives is nothing new. The spent uranium is because it's very hard for the tip of like armor-piercing shells. But no, using small micronuclear explosions is, this is all off-the-shelf technology.
Yeah, I saw a video. I think it was today or yesterday about. I don't know if you've seen it, but evidently one of the top floors of one of the towers was evidently rented by a drama group, a Jewish drama group, Austrian drama group, the whole floor. And they have pictures of it being full of all these high-tech explosives. Somebody got these pictures out, and yeah, I'll have to show it to you. It's an interesting theory on how they brought down the towers. Yeah, very highly sophisticated explosives.
Well, yeah, and the whole building was filled with these.
And these people were there for years, and they basically worked there or lived there, and they had somehow access to everything to bring it down. I don't. It sounds to me like a pretty serious inside kind of job, well-controlled situation. I mean, how they would get access to that much explosive and nobody noticing, and how they get access to all the different levels of the building to install these explosives. I mean, it's diabolical.
Well, yeah, and you don't just go out and buy this stuff at the local drugstore. This is very controlled substance. If there's a controlled substance,
they had pictures of the boxes, and it was a very high tech, very highly explosive, special triggering mechanisms. It was all triggerable through like a signal from a cell phone. It was sequenced. It was exactly what you would need to do such a job. And it was all on, and they somehow a little drama group has the ability to rent out a whole floor of the World Trade Center. I mean, come on. So it's another interesting theory in what really happened. Yeah.
Interesting to know that, James. My literary agent is Lisa Elkins Goodman, and she is on the committee of architects and engineers. I assume that maybe you are. I don't know, but you may be on that special architects and engineers committee that did so much research, to prove that it was all set up, to come down about the explosives and all that.
No, I'm not on any groups. I'm a guest sometimes with a guy named James Fetzer he's got a radio show, and he's the head of scholars for 9/11 truth. But
Okay.
I'm not myself on any committees or panels or anything. I've done many, many radio
Okay.
shows dealing with the topic, but no, I'm not on any group.
Well, it is still like Watergate and Nixon and the Bushes. The World Trade Center will forever be a topic of conversation.
Well, yeah, there's when I first saw it, there was a little TV in my kitchen, which I never really used, but one morning I flipped it on, and it was 9 o'clock in the morning, and here's Peter Jennings. This was the morning of 9/11. Peter Jennings, who does the evening news, he's up in his office, but he had an office in the World Trade Center. That's where his news room was. But he was in a different building with a big screen TV behind him, and he's doing the news. This is like 9 in the morning. He's already there, all set up. And then you see the other plane coming in, and it's all scripted.
Yeah. It's the same. This drama group left the building a week before the occurrence. Somehow they had a lease. They broke the lease. It made no sense. It obviously they knew what was going on. So anyways, guys, a great show today. Really appreciate you coming on at the last minute, both of you. So we'll have more of I Am Nature next week. And I'd like, if you guys can hang on for a sec to chat after the show, that would be great. But bye for now from I Am Nature, your host, Brian Porter.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Hi, this is Bo.
And this is Rocco.
And the Bo and Rocco Show is here to offer insight into legal and lawful remedies. Our goal is to remain free and help others remain free in an ever-increasing police-like state. With the help of our guests, we try to answer questions such as what went wrong and what can we do about it.
So tune into Revolution Radio at www.freedomslips.com Wednesday nights, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to listen to the Bo and Rocco Show.
You don't need to expect us.
We're already here.
Revolution Radio. Every Tuesday evening on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, we present our goddess spiritual warrior, Kathy Bilski.
I command. I call to the architect of the universe's divine creators and ask for permission to quantum leave the world in all life forms on all planes and dimensions, seen and unseen, connected with planet Earth, to let us go beyond our known potential into the greatest unknown golden age the universes and worlds and all planets have ever experienced.
Kathy teaches the spiritual truth so that you may create a better life and be able to make positive changes for yourself and for the planet. She helps us remember that we are not powerless, but very creative spiritual beings having an Earth experience. Time to quantum leap into the age of divine enlightenment and let Kathy provide you with the tools of knowledge you need to awaken spiritually. That's the Quantum Leap Show. Let Light Unite every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern on Revolution Radio Studio B.